The small courthouse in the heart of a quiet American town hummed with an unusual mix of tension and curiosity. It was a mid-morning session, but the air inside the courtroom felt charged, heavy with the weight of anticipation. The trial had drawn attention from the entire community, not just because of the nature of the case, a theft and assault that had shaken the neighborhood, but because the courtroom had become a stage for personalities, emotions, and reputations. Jurors, reporters, and spectators filled the benches, their whispers blending into a low, constant murmur that seemed to vibrate through the polished wooden floor. At the back of the room, almost unnoticed, a young mother tried to keep her toddler occupied. The girl, no older than 3, sat on her mother's lap, her small legs swinging, wide eyes darting curiously from the defendant to the jury box, from the bailiffs to the rows of cameras. She was quiet mostly, but she had a restless energy that seemed at odds with the solemnity of the courtroom. Her mother, clutching a small stuffed bear, kept glancing down at her daughter, attempting to maintain her focus, aware that the child's presence here was unusual but unavoidable. The trial had been scheduled with no exceptions. Near the front of the courtroom, positioned carefully beside a police officer, sat a large German shepherd, its sleek coat glinting under the fluorescent lights. The dog was calm, trained to remain still, eyes scanning the room for any sign of threat or instruction from its handler. Its presence was standard procedure for high-profile trials in the city, yet it carried an aura of authority, a quiet tension that seemed to heighten the atmosphere in the room. Most adults focused on the proceedings, on the witnesses, on the case files spread across the tables. But the toddler's attention was fixed entirely on the dog. As the trial commenced, the prosecuting attorney rose and adjusted his suit jacket. His voice carried with a confident authority, recounting the events leading to the alleged crime. Witnesses were called, and one by one, they described their observations, fragments of chaos that painted a picture of theft, confrontation, and fear. The courtroom listened intently, some nodding in understanding, others shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The tension in the room escalated with each word, each testimony layering doubt, suspicion, and unease into the minds of everyone present. The toddler, meanwhile, seemed oblivious to the human drama unfolding in front of her. She squirmed slightly in her mother's lap, stretching out her tiny fingers to touch the railing, pointing at the marble walls and making soft, cooing sounds to herself. Every so often, her gaze returned to the German shepherd. There was something about the dog that held her fascination, not fear, not playfulness, but a curiosity that seemed deeply instinctive. The dog, sensing her focus, briefly turned its head toward her, ears pricking, as if acknowledging a presence that was entirely out of place in the rigid courtroom order. The mother tried to shush her daughter gently when she noticed the quiet murmurs around them. A few spectators glanced over, some smirking at the innocence of a child amid a serious legal proceeding. But there was a peculiarity in the toddler's expression, a seriousness that seemed almost adult, as if she were absorbing the events with an understanding far beyond her years. Her small mouth opened, and she murmured something inaudible at first, barely rising above a whisper. Her mother leaned in, attempting to hush her, but then realized the words were deliberate, purposeful, almost commanding. Meanwhile, the defendant, a man in his early 30s with a tense jaw and restless eyes, sat at the defense table, flipping through papers as if trying to make sense of the chaos of the courtroom. His lawyer whispered instructions in his ear, but his attention seemed divided, a subtle unease creeping over him. Something in the air was different today. The murmurs, the sideways glances, the odd focus of the people around him, it all created a pressure he could not articulate. Yet he remained seated, eyes occasionally flicking toward the front, toward the police dog, though he did not understand why. The prosecutor continued, packing slowly as he laid out evidence, witness statements, and the timeline of events. He was meticulous, careful to detail every moment, every action, every decision that had led to the charges. The judge, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a calm but commanding presence, listened intently, occasionally nodding or tapping her pen against the bench. The courtroom was a well-oiled machine of procedure, yet under the surface, there was an undercurrent of anticipation, as though the room itself sensed that something unexpected was about to happen. And then, amid the meticulous recounting of events, the toddler shifted. She pointed at the dog. Her finger, tiny and precise, extended toward the German shepherd as her eyes locked onto it with an intensity that drew the attention of those around her. "That one," she said softly, almost under her breath. Her mother froze, unsure if she had heard correctly. A few nearby spectators leaned closer, curious. Some laughed softly, thinking it a cute distraction. But the dog's ears twitched, and its gaze remained steady on the toddler, an almost imperceptible acknowledgement that something was indeed happening. For a moment the courtroom paused, though no one knew it yet. The prosecutor's voice faltered mid-sentence. The judge's pen hovered above her notes. The air seemed to thrum with tension, subtle but undeniable. A tiny human, no more than 3 years old, had drawn the attention of a highly trained police dog in the midst of a tense courtroom trial. The moment was fleeting, almost imperceptible, but it was enough to ripple through the room, planting the seeds of curiosity and anticipation that would grow into something extraordinary. Something no one, not the defendant, not the jurors, not even the seasoned lawyers, could have anticipated. And thus, in the quiet chaos of a typical courthouse day, a small child's attention marked the first spark of what would become a courtroom event no one would ever forget. The courtroom had settled into a tense rhythm, each word of testimony weighed with scrutiny, each gesture watched for clues. The prosecuting attorney continued meticulously describing the timeline of the alleged crime, his voice steady, but carrying the urgency of a case that had captivated the entire town. Witnesses came and went, some shaky, some confident, each adding their piece to the puzzle. Every so often a juror shifted uneasily, glancing at the defendant, then to the gallery, their faces betraying the strain of balancing empathy with judgment. The case was serious, the stakes high, and yet amid the formal proceedings, a quiet but unusual focus had emerged in one small observer. The toddler's gaze remained locked on the police dog. It was not the dog itself that seemed to enthrall her, but something more, an instinctive recognition, almost like she could feel the dog's thoughts. Her tiny fingers twitched in anticipation, and she squirmed in her mother's lap, leaning slightly forward as if the movement would draw her companion's attention closer. A few spectators began to notice the child, whispering to one another, exchanging amused smiles. "She's pointing at the dog," one murmured. Another chuckled. "Kids and animals, they always have their own world." But those who understood the gravity of the dog's role, a highly trained K-9 officer capable of detecting stress, hidden objects, and subtle threats, felt a ripple of unease. The toddler's voice broke through the murmurs, soft but clear. "He did it." Her mother's eyes widened. "What, sweetie, shh," she began, but the words caught in her throat. The toddler was not babbling, not playing with sounds. Her tone was confident, declarative, and precise. The courtroom seemed to pause, the low hum of whispered conversations fading as people turned toward the source of the unexpected statement. The German shepherd's ears twitched again, and it shifted slightly on its haunches, its gaze following the toddler's extended finger. It was an almost imperceptible reaction, but anyone familiar with K-9 training knew such a gesture was significant. A dog only reacted in that way when it sensed something important. The defense attorney's head snapped up, disbelief written across his face. "Excuse me?" he asked, leaning toward his client. The defendant's eyes darted nervously toward the back of the room. A tiny child, barely walking, had just pointed and spoken words that seemed laden with meaning. The judge raised an eyebrow, pen hovering above her notes. "Did she just?" murmured one of the jurors to the person next to them. Reporters instinctively started typing, realizing that an unusual moment in the courtroom might become a headline in seconds. The weight of anticipation hung thick in the air, a tension that was almost tangible. The mother clutched her daughter, unsure whether to scold her for speaking out of turn or marvel at the child's intuition. "Sweetie, what do you mean?" she whispered, leaning closer. But the toddler did not shy away. Her small hands pointed more insistently, her voice rising just enough to carry across a few feet. "Right there, that's him." All eyes were now on the child, and all thoughts in the room shifted from the case to the remarkable clarity of this moment. The German shepherd let out a low, subtle growl, more of an alert than aggression, and took a small step toward the suspect. The dog's handler, a seasoned officer with years of experience, immediately noticed the alignment of the toddler's gesture with the dog's behavior. "No way," he murmured under his breath, kneeling slightly beside the animal. The dog's tail was still, its posture alert. Trained to follow subtle cues and detect hidden threats, the canine had identified something that the adults, lawyers, officers, and jury members, had entirely overlooked. The courtroom grew quiet, save for the rustling of papers and the occasional shuffle of feet. Everyone's attention was now focused on the child. Her tiny hand trembled slightly with the excitement of being heard, but her eyes were sharp, clear, and commanding in a way that seemed beyond her years. Some spectators exchanged skeptical glances. "It's a kid," one whispered. "What could she possibly see?" Yet the dog's behavior contradicted that skepticism, its subtle signs affirming the toddler's pointing. The alignment of innocence and instinct became a strange, almost electric tension in the room. The prosecuting attorney paused mid-sentence, gaze flicking toward the back of the courtroom. "Your Honor, should we?" He stopped, unsure. Could a toddler's gesture hold weight in a formal courtroom? Yet he sensed the implications. There was more at stake than procedure. There was truth in the unexpected. The judge's eyes narrowed, curiosity mixing with the habitual sternness of her demeanor. Let's hear her out," she said finally, her voice calm but carrying a sharp undercurrent of authority. "Child, can you tell us what you see?" The toddler blinked once, then leaned forward, her small body radiating a strange mixture of confidence and innocence. She pointed again, this time with clarity and insistence. "He hit it, right there," she said. Her words, simple yet precise, had an uncanny accuracy that made the adults hold their breath. The German shepherd reacted instantly, moving closer to the suspect, nose twitching, ears alert. The handler's jaw tightened. He could not deny the dog's response. It had mirrored the child's statement perfectly, confirming that something crucial had been identified. Murmurs erupted through the courtroom. Jurors whispered to each other, lawyers leaned forward, and reporters furiously recorded every detail. Even the defendant, pale and tense, began to realize that the day had just taken an unexpected turn. He glanced nervously at the child, then at the dog, then back at his lawyer. His confident composure, carefully maintained through weeks of legal strategizing, began to falter under the weight of this unforeseen alliance between innocence and instinct. The mother hugged her daughter close, heart pounding. She could hardly believe what was happening. Her child, tiny and unassuming, had captured the attention of the courtroom and the trained instincts of a police dog simultaneously. In a room full of adults trained to read behavior, analyze evidence, and follow procedure, it was the smallest voice that commanded the most attention. She whispered softly, "Be careful, honey. Just tell them." The toddler's eyes remained bright, unafraid. She pointed once more, her small finger trembling with a combination of excitement and certainty. The dog responded immediately, sitting closer to the suspect and letting out a soft, authoritative growl, a signal the handler recognized as a sign of detection. The alignment was unmistakable. The child's innocent declaration and the dog's trained alert had revealed something hidden. The courtroom now teetered on the edge of disbelief and awe, the ordinary rhythm of legal proceedings suspended by a tiny human and a vigilant animal. By the end of the morning session, the courtroom was buzzing with tension unlike anything experienced before. Every adult in the room, from the stern judge to the skeptical jurors, understood that the day had changed. A toddler had done more than merely observe. She had spoken, pointed, and inadvertently commanded the attention of a trained police dog, creating a moment that would ripple through the trial and the town itself. For everyone present, it was the start of an extraordinary chain of events, one that no one could have predicted, and one that would become the defining memory of this unusual courtroom session. The courtroom had shifted. What began as a standard morning trial now hummed with an undercurrent of disbelief. Everyone, from the judge to the jurors, had noticed the toddler's sudden outburst and her peculiar focus on the police dog. The murmurs that had once been polite whispers of courtroom etiquette had grown louder, threading through the room like an electric current. Spectators leaned forward, reporters jotted notes faster than ever, and even the defense attorney felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on him. How could a child, barely 3 years old, command the attention of a courtroom, and more importantly, a trained police dog? The toddler's finger still extended toward the front of the room, trembling slightly but firm. "There," she insisted, her voice rising just enough to carry over the subtle buzz of whispers. Her mother clutched her tighter, heart racing, unsure whether she should hush her child or marvel at what was unfolding. Around them, jurors exchanged wide-eyed glances, trying to reconcile the innocence of a tiny girl with the extraordinary accuracy of her claim. "Could she?" one whispered. "No, she's just a child," another replied, uncertain but clearly intrigued. At the front, the police dog's ears twitched, and its posture shifted slightly, a trained response to something the dog had identified. Its handler, a tall officer with weathered features and years of K-9 experience, knelt beside the animal, eyes narrowing in astonishment. The dog's subtle signals had never failed before, yet now they seemed to align perfectly with the child's pointing. The alignment was uncanny, impossible even, yet undeniable. The officer whispered almost to himself, "She's right." The prosecuting attorney, previously packing and recounting evidence, paused mid-sentence. His confident voice faltered as he observed the scene, a toddler and a police dog seemingly acting in perfect synchronization. He looked toward the judge, uncertain, and then back at the gallery. "Your Honor, may I request," he began, hesitating. The words felt strange, almost absurd. He was asking permission to acknowledge a child's observation in a serious legal proceeding. Yet the dog's subtle growl, a trained alert, reinforced that this was no mere coincidence. The judge, a woman in her 50s with piercing eyes and decades of courtroom experience, leaned forward slightly. Her pen hovered above her notes as she studied the scene. Let's hear what she has to say," she said finally, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. A ripple of disbelief swept through the room. The idea that a toddler might influence proceedings, even indirectly, was unheard of. But the judge's authority lent weight to the moment, and the room hushed almost immediately, waiting for the child to speak again. The toddler straightened slightly, encouraged by her mother's gentle squeeze. Her small mouth opened and she pointed with renewed emphasis. "He hit it," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "Right there, that one." The courtroom froze. Every adult present instinctively leaned forward. Reporters scribbled furiously, trying to capture the words that had suddenly transformed the trial into something extraordinary. Jurors exchanged wide-eyed glances, murmuring softly among themselves. The defense attorney leaned closer to his client, whispering frantically, "Did she just?" The suspect, pale and tense, began to sweat, realizing that this small, unassuming child had inadvertently drawn attention to him in a way no one could ignore. The German Shepherd moved slightly, its nose lowering toward the suspect's feet. Its handler knelt beside it, trying to maintain composure while his mind raced. The dog's alert signals had never failed, and now they corroborated the toddler's pointing. This isn't happening," the officer muttered under his breath, torn between disbelief and awe. The alignment of a toddler's words and a trained police dog's instincts was almost surreal, yet there it was, right before everyone's eyes. Whispers became audible. Spectators craned their necks to see what was happening, and journalists, sensing the gravity of the moment, adjusted their cameras and microphones. "She's pointing at him," one juror whispered to another. "And the dog," another murmured, trailing off. The room was a blend of skepticism, curiosity, and incredulity. Everyone could feel the tension building, like the quiet before a storm. The ordinary rhythm of a legal proceeding had been disrupted by innocence, instinct, and a startling coincidence. The mother tried to keep her daughter calm, smoothing her hair gently and murmuring, "Just tell them, sweetie. Just tell them what you saw." The toddler nodded, seemingly understanding the weight of her tiny words, and pointed again, her small finger unwavering. The dog responded instantly, stepping closer, eyes focused and alert. Its handler's jaw tightened as he realized the significance. The dog had identified the precise area of interest, aligning perfectly with the child's observation. The prosecutor, sensing an opportunity, spoke carefully. "Your Honor, with your permission, may the officer allow the dog to indicate what it has detected?" His voice carried a mix of caution and excitement. The judge nodded, her eyes narrowing as she processed the scene. "Yes," she said, voice steady. "But proceed carefully. We will follow procedure." The officer gave a subtle signal to the dog. The German Shepherd responded instantly, moving closer to the suspect, nose twitching, body tense. The courtroom watched in stunned silence. The alignment of child and canine had revealed a hidden clue, something adults had completely overlooked. The defendant's face drained of color, sweat forming on his forehead. He shifted nervously, as though he had suddenly realized he was caught in a trap invisible to everyone else, except for a toddler and a dog. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled notes frantically, some whispering to their colleagues, "This will be the headline of the week." Jurors exchanged shocked glances, some leaning forward, eyes wide. Even seasoned courtroom staff felt the tension. A tiny human and a trained animal had disrupted the normal order of justice in a way no one could have predicted. The mundane had become extraordinary, the routine had turned miraculous, and the room held its collective breath. For a moment, the courtroom was suspended in disbelief. The toddler's innocence had become a beacon of truth, her observation validated by the silent but commanding signals of the police dog. It was an alignment of intuition, instinct, and pure chance, an extraordinary collaboration that no one had orchestrated but everyone now witnessed. Even the defendant seemed to recognize the gravity of the moment, his usual composure replaced by an almost primal fear, eyes darting between the toddler, the dog, and the authorities. The judge called for a brief recess, allowing everyone a moment to process what had just happened. The gallery buzzed with murmurs, the jury whispered among themselves, and reporters spoke in hurried tones into their recorders. The mother held her child close, heart pounding, proud but anxious about the attention her daughter had unwittingly drawn. The police dog remained alert, sitting obediently, ears pricked, aware of the gravity of the situation it had confirmed. As the court took its short break, the atmosphere shifted. What had begun as an ordinary trial was now a courtroom story unlike any other, a tale of innocence and instinct, of a tiny child whose words and gestures had commanded attention, and a police dog whose training revealed truths hidden from the eyes of adults. The stage was set for revelations that would shock the town, the courtroom, and everyone who would later hear the story. And as the toddler sat on her mother's lap, clutching her stuffed bear, neither of them could have imagined the extraordinary role they had already begun to play. The courtroom was silent, but the tension was palpable, hanging like a heavy curtain over every witness, juror, and spectator. All eyes were on the toddler and the police dog. The officer kneeling beside the German Shepherd's side could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Years of experience with K-9 units had taught him to trust the dog's instincts implicitly. Still, he had never witnessed a reaction like this, an alert perfectly mirroring the precise direction of a toddler's finger. His mind raced, trying to process what he knew. This child had noticed something adults had missed, and the dog had confirmed it in the most undeniable way. The toddler, unaware of the gravity of her actions, sat up straighter in her mother's lap, pointing again, small finger trembling slightly but unwavering in its determination. "There," she declared, her tiny voice loud enough to carry just beyond the hushed murmurs of the courtroom. The officer leaned closer to the dog, watching its body language carefully. Its ears were pricked, tail stiff, and posture rigid, a signal the officer recognized immediately as a detection alert. Trained as it was, the dog never gave a false positive. And now, in alignment with the child's observation, the evidence of its focus was clear for all to see. The mother's heart pounded in her chest. She whispered softly to her daughter, "Sweetie, just tell them what you saw." The toddler nodded obediently, her wide eyes fixed on the dog and the defendant. Around them, the room seemed to hold its collective breath. Jurors leaned forward, faces tense and curious. Reporters raised their cameras, scribbling notes furiously. Even the judge, a woman who had presided over hundreds of trials, seemed momentarily stunned by the strange alignment of innocence and trained instinct before her. The officer quietly signaled the dog, giving it a small, almost imperceptible hand gesture. The German Shepherd responded immediately, moving closer to the suspect, lowering its nose as if to inspect something hidden. The subtle growl it emitted was enough to cause the defendant to shift uneasily in his seat. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his fingers drummed nervously against the table. He had expected nothing from this child, nothing from this dog, but now both had conspired in the silent revelation of what had been hidden. The officer's mind raced. He had seen dogs detect contraband, explosives, and even subtle signs of deceit before, but he had never experienced the surreal combination of a toddler's instinct and a dog's training converging so perfectly in a courtroom. He whispered under his breath, almost as if confessing to himself, She's right. The dog knows. She knows." His eyes flicked to the toddler, whose tiny hand continued to point decisively, and then back to the defendant. There was no mistaking it. Something critical had been revealed, and the courtroom's attention could no longer ignore it. The prosecutor, sensing the extraordinary moment, paused mid-argument. "Your Honor," he said carefully, "may we allow the officer to follow the dog's lead? It seems there may be something here that has been overlooked." He tried to maintain a professional tone, but his eyes betrayed a mixture of disbelief and excitement. The judge studied the scene, her pen hovering above the bench. After a brief pause, she nodded. "Very well. Let the officer and his K9 indicate what they have detected," she instructed. Her calm command carried authority, and the courtroom leaned in closer, anticipation crackling in the air. The officer gave another subtle hand signal. The German Shepherd moved with precision, circling the suspect and sniffing along the edges of the chair and floor. Its movements were measured, deliberate, and purposeful. The dog's nose twitched repeatedly, signaling detection in a way the handler had been trained to recognize. Every juror watched intently, some leaning forward, others whispering to themselves in disbelief. The toddler's hand remained steady, now pointing at a precise spot on the floor. The alignment was uncanny. Adults with years of training and experience were now witnessing a toddler and a dog working in perfect unison to reveal something hidden from sight. The defendant's composure faltered. His eyes darted nervously from the toddler to the dog, back to his lawyer, and finally toward the officer. He swallowed hard, realizing that the very elements he had dismissed, the child's words, the dog's instincts, were now converging against him. Panic began to creep into his expression, a subtle but undeniable shift from the calculated calm he had maintained. He had been confident that no one could expose his hidden actions, but here they were, a toddler and a police dog, innocent and trained, unmasking the truth. The mother whispered again to her daughter, "You're doing great, honey, just show them." The toddler's face, a mixture of pride and concentration, lit up slightly. She leaned forward, pointing more precisely. "There, that's it," she said. Her voice rang clearly through the hushed courtroom. The dog responded instantly, lowering its head to the exact location the child indicated, emitting another low, authoritative growl. The handler's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with professional certainty. The dog had confirmed the child's observation exactly. The murmurs that had been rippling through the room grew louder. Reporters whispered urgently to each other, realizing this was no ordinary trial moment. "Did you see that? The child and the dog," one muttered, voice low but incredulous. Jurors exchanged stunned glances, some leaning in, their eyes wide. Even seasoned courtroom staff found themselves holding their breath, watching the delicate dance between innocence and instinct. The courtroom had become a stage for an extraordinary revelation that defied ordinary expectations of logic or procedure. The judge, finally breaking her silence, leaned forward slightly and called the room to order. "Everyone, please remain calm. We will proceed carefully," she instructed. Her voice was calm, but there was an unmistakable undertone of awe. She studied the child and the dog, noting the alignment between the toddler's gestures and the canine's trained responses. "It seems we have encountered an unusual but potentially significant observation," she added. The courtroom responded with a collective murmur of agreement, acknowledging the rarity of what was unfolding before them. The officer continued to guide the dog with subtle gestures. Each movement was precise, measured, and deliberate. The dog sniffed the indicated area, confirming what the toddler had pointed out. The alignment was flawless. Jurors leaned forward, their eyes glued to the action. The defendant shifted uncomfortably, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. His lawyer whispered hurriedly, clearly attempting to recalibrate his strategy in light of this unprecedented revelation. What adults had failed to detect in weeks of investigation had now been revealed by a tiny child and a trained police dog working, unintentionally, in tandem. By the end of the session, the courtroom was abuzz with a mix of disbelief, astonishment, and curiosity. The toddler had unwittingly taken center stage, her innocence amplifying the drama of the moment. The dog, obedient and professional, had validated her observation in a way that no human could have predicted. Witnesses, jurors, and reporters were all left to process the extraordinary convergence of instinct, intuition, and training they had just witnessed. The trial, once predictable and routine, had transformed into a story that no one would soon forget. A story where innocence and expertise collided to reveal the truth. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, whispering words of comfort and awe. "You've amazed everyone," she said, voice trembling. The toddler beamed faintly, still pointing, still focused, unaware of the magnitude of her actions. Around them, the courtroom settled into a tense pause, everyone aware that what had occurred was extraordinary. The alignment between a toddler's simple, honest observation and the trained instincts of a police dog had shifted the entire dynamic of the trial. And in that moment, the impossible had become reality, leaving all present stunned, captivated, and eager to see what would happen next. The courtroom had reached a surreal stillness. Even the faint rustle of papers seemed magnified in the charged silence. Every eye was on the toddler and the police dog, whose synchronized actions had captured the attention of every adult in the room. The officer knelt quietly beside his German shepherd, trying to maintain control, while the dog's trained instincts continued to validate the child's pointing. The alignment between innocence and training had not just disrupted the courtroom, it had seized it completely. Jurors leaned forward in their seats, some gripping the wooden railings in awe, as the tension became almost unbearable. The judge, a woman accustomed to maintaining order in high-stakes trials, had never encountered a situation like this. Her stern face softened slightly as she observed the scene, recognizing that the ordinary rules of procedure were insufficient for this extraordinary moment. She set down her pen and called for silence. "Court will stand in recess for a brief clarification," she said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of something unprecedented. Murmurs erupted around the room, spectators whispered urgently, reporters adjusted cameras, and jurors exchanged incredulous glances. Even the defendant shifted uncomfortably, realizing the extraordinary implications of the tiny child's observation. The mother, cradling her daughter protectively, whispered softly, "You're safe, honey. Just tell them what you saw." The toddler nodded, wide-eyed but determined, seemingly aware of the attention she had commanded. She lifted her small hand and pointed with precision toward the front of the courtroom. "There, that's it," she said, voice ringing clearly in the hushed chamber. Every adult froze, caught between disbelief and awe. The German Shepherd responded instantly, stepping closer to the suspect and signaling with the low, measured growl that marked the officer's trained detection. The officer, kneeling beside the dog, exhaled slowly. He had been in law enforcement for over a decade and had trained with K-9 units longer than most could imagine. He had seen dogs detect narcotics, explosives, and even subtle signs of deception, but never had he witnessed such an uncanny alignment between a toddler's observation and a dog's trained instincts. He whispered under his breath, barely audible to anyone but himself, "It's impossible, but she's right." His eyes flicked back and forth between the child, the dog, and the suspect, registering the astonishing reality. The hidden clue had been exposed by the unlikely duo. The defendant, a man who had remained relatively composed throughout the trial, now seemed on the verge of panic. His eyes darted nervously from the child to the dog, back to his lawyer, and finally toward the officer. He shifted in his seat, swallowing hard, realizing that the very evidence he had believed hidden was now unmistakably revealed. The child had spoken, the dog had confirmed, and the courtroom had witnessed the convergence of two minds, innocent and trained, capable of detecting truths that adults had overlooked for weeks. Prosecuting attorney, sensing an extraordinary opportunity, rose carefully. "Your Honor, with permission, we would like the officer to proceed with the K-9 to confirm what the child has indicated," he said. His voice carried a mix of caution and excitement. The judge, still observing the toddler and the dog, nodded. "Yes, but proceed with care. Let the record show the unusual nature of this observation," she instructed. The courtroom leaned in closer, anticipation practically tangible in the air. Spectators exchanged wide-eyed glances. Reporters prepared their cameras and recorders, and jurors shifted forward, captivated by the unfolding spectacle. The toddler, emboldened by the court's attention, pointed more deliberately. "He hit it, right there," she exclaimed, her tiny finger steady and unwavering. The German Shepherd reacted immediately, moving closer to the indicated area. Its low growl resonated through the courtroom, a subtle but undeniable signal of detection. The officer guided the dog carefully, ensuring that its behavior remained disciplined while simultaneously confirming the child's claim. The alignment was flawless, a rare moment of perfect synchronization between human instinct and animal training. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, encouraging her without interrupting. "Good job, sweetie, just show them." The toddler's eyes shone with determination. She leaned forward slightly, her small hand pointing with precision toward the suspect's seat. The dog's movements were deliberate and exact, sniffing the indicated area and giving repeated, measured signals. Each growl and shift in posture confirmed the child's observation. The courtroom was on edge. A collective breath held as every adult tried to process the implications of what they were witnessing. The defense attorney leaned toward his client, whispering urgently, "Stay calm. We can contest this." But the defendant barely heard him, eyes glued to the child and the dog. Panic was evident, creeping across his face, as he realized the truth of what had just been exposed. Weeks of planning, calculated movements, and careful concealment were unraveling before a courtroom audience, revealed not by expert testimony or surveillance footage, but by a toddler's observation and a dog's trained instincts. The judge, recognizing the extraordinary nature of the event, called for a brief recess. "Court will pause for 10 minutes to allow all parties to assess this unusual situation," she said. Murmurs filled the room again, reporters whispered urgently, and spectators exchanged incredulous glances. Even the jurors, usually tasked with maintaining impartial focus, seemed absorbed by the drama unfolding before them. This was no ordinary trial. It had transformed into a living story of intuition, training, and the improbable collaboration between innocence and instinct. Outside the courtroom, the story began to ripple quickly through the courthouse. Bailiffs, staff, and reporters spoke in hushed tones about the extraordinary moment. Some speculated about the toddler's intuition, others about the dog's training. But everyone agreed on one thing: No one could have predicted this. The courtroom had become a stage for an unprecedented revelation, a convergence of human innocence and professional expertise that defied expectations and protocol. When the recess ended, the courtroom returned to tense silence. The toddler, still perched on her mother's lap, seemed unbothered by the attention, as though she were merely pointing out something obvious. But the adults knew otherwise. This child had altered the course of the trial in a way no one had anticipated. The dog remained alert, attentive to its handler and the child's gestures, ready to confirm the next step if needed. The room bristled with anticipation, knowing that the next few minutes could dramatically reshape the proceedings. The officer guided the dog carefully, allowing it to indicate the precise area the child had pointed out. The growl, subtle but unmistakable, confirmed the presence of something hidden beneath the suspect's seat. The defendant's composure had collapsed entirely, replaced by a pale, tight-lipped panic. The jurors leaned in closer, some whispering softly to one another, eyes wide with disbelief. Reporters scribbled notes furiously, cameras capturing every moment, knowing that they had witnessed an event that would be recounted long after the trial ended. In that moment, the courtroom had become more than a venue for legal proceedings. It was a stage for the improbable, the extraordinary, and the miraculous. The smallest voice, a toddler's observation, had captured the attention of trained adults and a highly skilled police dog. And together, the child and animal had revealed what no one else could see, forcing every adult in the room to reconsider assumptions, evidence, and the very nature of perception itself. The judge, observing carefully, allowed the officer to complete the verification process. The dog circled the indicated area again, growling softly and signaling with absolute precision. The child pointed with unwavering confidence, her wide eyes reflecting curiosity and authority beyond her years. The alignment between them was flawless. The courtroom, previously tense with routine anticipation, now pulsed with amazement, suspense, and a profound sense of witnessing the extraordinary. As the proceedings resumed, the courtroom was quiet, every participant absorbing the reality of what had transpired. The toddler, her pointing complete, relaxed slightly in her mother's arms, unaware of the impact she had just made. The German shepherd sat obediently, ears pricked, eyes still scanning the room for cues. The judge adjusted her notes, pensively considering the ramifications. The defendant, pale and shaken, realized that the simple alignment of a child's observation and a dog's instinct had undone his carefully constructed defense. For a brief, unforgettable moment, the courtroom had been suspended between disbelief and revelation. Everyone present, from jurors to lawyers, spectators to reporters, knew they had witnessed something rare and extraordinary. A tiny child and a trained police dog had together revealed what adults had missed, altering the dynamics of the trial and leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. The courtroom had transformed into a theater of disbelief and fascination. Every adult present was fixated on the toddler and the police dog, whose synchronized actions had captured the room's attention completely. The German shepherd, disciplined and highly trained, moved with precision toward the area the child had indicated, its nose twitching as it identified a small, inconspicuous object partially hidden beneath the suspect's chair. The low, authoritative growl resonated through the courtroom, a signal that the officer recognized instantly. The alignment between the toddler's pointing finger and the dog's trained instincts was flawless, an extraordinary confirmation that left everyone momentarily stunned. The mother clutched her daughter tightly, whispering encouragement while trying to calm her own racing heart. "You're doing amazing," she murmured. The toddler, seemingly aware of the importance of her actions, remained still and focused, her small hand continuing to point toward the suspect. Around them, whispers grew into murmurs, murmurs into low conversations, and conversations into stunned silence as the implications of the discovery settled over the courtroom. Jurors leaned forward, reporters typed rapidly, and even seasoned attorneys exchanged incredulous glances. The officer, kneeling beside the dog, gave a subtle hand signal, instructing the animal to maintain focus while he carefully retrieved the item. The German shepherd obeyed immediately, sitting obediently yet alertly by the object's location. Slowly, the officer lifted the small bundle into view. It was a hidden package containing evidence that directly linked the defendant to the crime, a stolen wallet, and a set of items corroborating witness testimony. The evidence, which had been meticulously concealed, was now undeniably exposed, exactly where the toddler had pointed and where the dog had detected it. Gasps rippled across the courtroom. The prosecuting attorney's face lit up with triumph, though he struggled to maintain professionalism in the face of the extraordinary revelation. "Your Honor, the evidence has been located exactly as indicated by the child and confirmed by the K-9, he announced, voice steady but charged with excitement. The judge leaned forward slightly, eyes widening, and carefully considered the implications. This was not merely a procedural moment. It was a convergence of innocence and trained instinct, a scenario so rare that it seemed almost cinematic. The defendant's face paled. Sweat beaded on his forehead and he shifted nervously in his seat. His lawyer leaned in, whispering urgently, but the man barely registered the words. The meticulous defense strategy, carefully constructed over weeks, was collapsing under the weight of evidence revealed not by surveillance, witnesses, or forensic analysis, but by a toddler and a trained dog acting in harmony. The disbelief in the room was palpable. Even those accustomed to courtroom drama found themselves stunned by the improbable alignment. Jurors whispered among themselves, leaning in closer to study the object. Some glanced at the toddler, incredulous that a child could have such an unerring sense of observation. Others looked at the dog, recognizing that its trained instincts had performed flawlessly. The courtroom atmosphere was thick with awe, a shared acknowledgement that what had unfolded was nothing short of extraordinary. Reporters typed furiously, eager to capture every word and gesture, sensing the story's viral potential. The officer carefully placed the evidence on the table before the judge. The German shepherd remained alert, ears pricked and eyes scanning the room, a silent guardian of the truth it had helped reveal. The toddler, for her part, looked satisfied, her mission seemingly complete. Her small hand relaxed slightly, but her eyes continued to follow the suspect, bright and observant. The alignment of innocence and training had revealed what adults, with all their experience and preparation, had overlooked. It was a moment that transcended logic, a story that would resonate far beyond the courthouse walls. The judge adjusted her glasses and spoke carefully, acknowledging the unusual circumstances. Let the record reflect that the evidence was located precisely as indicated by a minor child and subsequently confirmed by a trained K-9 unit, she instructed. Her voice carried authority and calm, yet it was impossible to miss the subtle undertone of astonishment. Every adult in the courtroom understood that this was a rare and remarkable event, one that defied conventional expectations of evidence discovery and courtroom procedure. The prosecuting attorney rose, speaking to the jury with renewed emphasis. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have witnessed something extraordinary today," he began, his voice steady but energized. "The evidence before you was located not by ordinary means, but through the keen observation of a child and the trained instincts of a police dog. This demonstrates beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant attempted to conceal the truth, and yet truth has a way of revealing itself, even through the smallest and most unexpected channels." The jurors shifted in their seats, absorbing the weight of the revelation. Some whispered quietly, incredulous, while others sat back, stunned by the unusual convergence of circumstances. Every person present was acutely aware that they had witnessed something extraordinary, a tiny human and a trained animal acting in harmony to expose what adults had failed to discover. The gravity of the moment resonated deeply, transforming what had been an ordinary trial into a story of near-miraculous revelation. The defendant's composure crumbled further. His face drained of color as he realized the enormity of the situation. He had underestimated the child, ignored the potential influence of the dog, and believed his concealment was flawless. Now, both had conspired in their innocence and training to unmask his actions. His lawyer attempted to interject, but even the defense team recognized the improbable reality. The evidence could not be denied, and the courtroom had seen its exposure firsthand. Outside the courtroom, the story was beginning to ripple through the courthouse. Bailiffs, clerks, and spectators whispered eagerly, recounting the extraordinary event with disbelief and excitement. Reporters hurriedly filed updates to news outlets, knowing they had captured something unprecedented. Social media would soon explode with the tale of a toddler and a police dog revealing hidden evidence during a high-profile trial. The courtroom had become more than a venue for legal proceedings. It was now the epicenter of an improbable but undeniable revelation that would be remembered for years to come. The toddler's mother watched in awe as her daughter's small hand pointed with such confidence and clarity. She whispered softly, "You did it, sweetie. You helped them find the truth." The child beamed faintly, still clutching her stuffed bear, unaware of the full impact of her actions. The German shepherd, calm yet alert, remained at the front, a silent partner in the revelation. Together, they had transformed a courtroom into a stage for extraordinary truth, demonstrating that even the smallest voices and keenest instincts could uncover what adults had overlooked. The judge allowed the officer to carefully place the evidence into official custody. The alignment of the toddler's gesture and the dog's trained detection had not only exposed the concealed items, but also dramatically shifted the courtroom dynamic. Witnesses whispered in awe, the jurors exchanged incredulous glances, and reporters typed feverishly, capturing every detail. The room was united in amazement, recognizing the rare and incredible confluence of innocence, instinct, and professional training that had led to this revelation. As proceedings continued, the courtroom atmosphere remained electrified. Every participant, from jurors to attorneys, understood that this moment was extraordinary. The defendant, visibly shaken, now faced the undeniable reality of his exposure. The toddler, small and unassuming, had unwittingly altered the course of the trial. The police dog, disciplined and trained, had provided confirmation that no human judgment could contest. The convergence of these two forces, childlike innocence and professional skill, had revealed the hidden truth, leaving a courtroom full of adults in stunned admiration. And as the session pressed forward, every whisper, glance, and gesture carried the echo of the extraordinary moment. The toddler's pointing finger and the dog's alert signals had not only uncovered the hidden evidence, but had also captured the imagination and awe of everyone present. The trial would continue, but the story of this revelation, the improbable yet undeniable alignment between a child's observation and a trained dog's instincts, would become the defining memory of the day, a moment etched into the minds of all who had witnessed it. The courtroom was a storm of whispers, exchanged glances, and barely suppressed astonishment. Every adult present was processing what they had just witnessed. A toddler and a police dog, acting in concert, had exposed evidence the defendant had tried to conceal. The magnitude of the moment was sinking in, and it had unsettled everyone from jurors to attorneys. Even the judge, known for her composed demeanor, allowed herself a small pause, pen hovering above her notes, before restoring order. The day that had begun like any other trial had now become something extraordinary. Jurors leaned forward, murmuring softly amongst themselves, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and amazement. "Did she really see that?" one whispered. "And the dog?" another muttered, trailing off as they considered the implications. The combination of innocence and professional training had provided an unprecedented alignment of discovery, and it was impossible for the jury to ignore. Some jurors' hands tightened on the edges of the railing, eyes locked on the toddler, noting how precise her pointing had been. Their deliberations, which were to come later, would now be influenced by a moment that defied ordinary courtroom logic. The prosecuting attorney seized the opportunity, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, gesturing subtly toward the child and the police dog, "what you have just witnessed is not fiction or exaggeration. This toddler, guided by her instinct, and this trained K-9 unit have identified critical evidence in this case. Evidence that the defendant thought hidden, evidence he hoped would remain undiscovered. The alignment of these two, innocence and professional skill, has unveiled the truth in a way that no adult alone could have accomplished." The defense attorney, normally confident and composed, found himself struggling to regain control. He leaned toward his client, whispering urgently, but the defendant barely heard him. His face was pale, and his usual attempts at calm composure had dissolved under the weight of the toddler's revelation and the dog's trained precision. "How could this?" he muttered under his breath, shaking his head in disbelief. The courtroom had become a living paradox, where the smallest voice had commanded attention and revealed the truth in a way that no legal argument could have anticipated. Spectators in the gallery were abuzz. Some whispered excitedly to each other, while others sat frozen in disbelief, staring at the toddler and the dog. Cameras clicked and reporters scribbled furiously, capturing every detail. The extraordinary moment had turned a routine trial into a spectacle of intuition, instinct, and courage. Everyone present understood that they were witnessing a story they would recount for years to come, an event where innocence and skill converged in perfect alignment. The police dog handler remained kneeling beside the German shepherd, speaking quietly to the animal as he guided it carefully. Each movement of the dog was deliberate, controlled, and precise, a testament to years of training and discipline. Yet it was impossible to ignore the surreal nature of the situation. The dog had validated the toddler's pointing with flawless accuracy. The officer whispered softly, almost to himself, "This is unprecedented, but she's right. Spot on." His words carried the weight of someone who had witnessed countless training exercises and real-life operations, but had never encountered anything like this. The toddler, still perched on her mother's lap, seemed both proud and completely unaware of the full impact of her actions. She clutched her stuffed bear, her small hand occasionally pointing toward the defendant. Her wide eyes were filled with curiosity, a mixture of innocence and understanding, as if she instinctively knew that what she had done was important. Around her, the courtroom was captivated by the sheer improbability of the alignment between her observation and the dog's trained detection. The judge called the courtroom back to order, her voice calm but carrying unmistakable authority. "Let the record reflect the extraordinary circumstances observed today," she said. "The alignment of a minor child's observation and a trained K-9 unit's detection has resulted in the identification of critical evidence. All parties are directed to proceed with caution and maintain the integrity of the proceedings." The statement hung in the room like a weight, commanding both respect and awe. The defendant's panic grew as the implications of the toddler's pointing and the dog's detection sank in. His carefully constructed defense had been undermined by forces entirely outside his control. Sweat beaded on his forehead, and his eyes darted nervously between the child, the dog, and the officer. He swallowed hard, attempting to regain composure, but the courtroom had already shifted decisively. Witnesses, jurors, and spectators alike recognized that the revelation had changed the trajectory of the trial in a profound and undeniable way. Reporters whispered urgently to one another, adjusting cameras and microphones to capture every detail. "This will make national news," one said. "A toddler and a police dog uncover evidence in a courtroom unheard of." Others nodded in agreement, recognizing that the extraordinary moment had not only legal implications but also a narrative power that would captivate the public. The alignment of innocence and instinct, truth and training, had created a story that transcended the ordinary. The jurors, still wide-eyed, absorbed every nuance of the unfolding events. Some leaned forward in anticipation, watching the toddler's small hand and the dog's deliberate movements. Others whispered softly to each other, trying to reconcile the extraordinary discovery with their understanding of evidence and procedure. The room, previously filled with routine anticipation, was now alive with suspense, curiosity, and a shared acknowledgement of witnessing something rare and remarkable. The mother whispered softly to her daughter, smoothing her hair and gently guiding her hand. "You've helped everyone see the truth," she said. The toddler nodded faintly, her attention never leaving the dog or the defendant. Her innocence, combined with her precise observation, had created a moment of extraordinary clarity. The courtroom, suspended between disbelief and revelation, seemed to recognize that something remarkable had occurred. A child's insight validated by the unwavering instincts of a trained professional animal. The police dog remained alert, sitting obediently beside its handler, ears pricked and eyes scanning the room for any further cues. Its presence was a silent affirmation of the discovery, a reminder that training and instinct could converge to reveal truths adults might overlook. Every juror, reporter, and spectator recognized the unusual significance of this moment. The child's small gesture, paired with the dog's disciplined response, had altered the proceedings and captured the imagination of everyone present. The judge, maintaining her composure but clearly impressed, addressed the courtroom once more. "This session has demonstrated the unusual but undeniable alignment of observation and trained detection. All parties are reminded to proceed carefully and acknowledge the extraordinary nature of these events." The courtroom responded with a collective murmur, acknowledging the gravity and rarity of the situation. By the end of the day, the courtroom had been forever changed. The alignment between the toddler and the police dog had revealed hidden evidence, stunned the jury, captivated the spectators, and thrown the defendant into a state of panic. Witnesses, reporters, and legal professionals would later recount this day as one of the most unusual and remarkable moments in courtroom history. The smallest voice, paired with the instincts of a trained animal, had altered the course of justice in a way no one could have predicted. And as the courtroom slowly returned to routine procedure, the memory of the toddler's pointing finger and the dog's precise detection lingered. It was a moment suspended in disbelief and awe, a testament to the improbable alignment of innocence, instinct, and truth. For everyone present, the story had become larger than the trial itself, a tale that would echo far beyond the courthouse walls and leave a lasting impression on all who witnessed it. The courtroom had quieted into a tense, expectant hush. After hours of watching a toddler's small gestures align perfectly with the trained instincts of a police dog, every adult present was captivated. The discovery of the hidden evidence had left the defendant pale, shaken, and visibly defeated. The jurors, reporters, and spectators sat in stunned silence, processing the improbable but undeniable revelation that had shifted the trajectory of the trial. What had begun as an ordinary legal proceeding had transformed into a moment that would be remembered for decades. The judge, composed but visibly impressed, called the court to order. All parties have now witnessed the discovery of evidence confirmed by a minor child and a trained K-9 unit. The court acknowledges the unusual circumstances of this case and will proceed accordingly. Her words, measured and authoritative, seemed to carry the weight of history. Everyone understood that what had occurred transcended routine courtroom procedure. This was a moment that defied logic yet proved the power of observation, intuition, and collaboration between human and animal. The defendant shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His lawyer leaned toward him, whispering urgently, but the man's eyes betrayed a dawning realization. Weeks of careful planning, attempts at concealment, and confident manipulation had been rendered irrelevant by a toddler and a dog. Sweat beaded on his brow, and his usually confident demeanor had dissolved into panic and disbelief. He glanced at the child and then at the German shepherd, understanding too late that innocence and training had revealed a truth he had hoped would remain hidden. The prosecuting attorney, sensing the opportunity, addressed the jury with measured confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen, you have witnessed something extraordinary today. The child's observation, validated by a trained K-9 unit, has revealed evidence that confirms the defendant's attempt to conceal the truth. Justice has been illuminated not only by investigation and procedure, but also by the keen perception of an innocent child and the disciplined instincts of a professional animal. We ask that you weigh this evidence carefully as you deliberate. Jurors exchanged glances, whispers rippling through the room. Some leaned forward, eyes wide, as they considered the implications of what they had witnessed. The alignment of the toddler's pointing and the dog's trained behavior had introduced a level of clarity and certainty that went beyond ordinary testimony. They could not ignore the significance of this moment. The unlikely collaboration had revealed a truth that would have otherwise remained concealed. Every juror understood that they had been part of something remarkable, something almost surreal in its precision and timing. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, whispering softly. "You've helped them find the truth," she said. The toddler beamed faintly, her wide eyes filled with pride and curiosity, unaware of the profound impact her observation had on the trial. She clutched her stuffed bear tightly, a small but steadfast symbol of comfort in the midst of chaos. Around them, the courtroom seemed suspended in awe, as if the very air recognized the significance of what had just occurred. The police dog remained alert, sitting obediently beside its handler. Its eyes, keen and watchful, scanned the courtroom for cues, confirming that its work was complete and precise. The handler whispered quietly to the animal, praising it for its accuracy and discipline. The dog's contribution had been critical, but the extraordinary element was the alignment, the uncanny synchronization of a child's instinct and a trained dog's detection. It was a moment of pure, almost cinematic, revelation, leaving an indelible mark on everyone present. Outside the courtroom, the story spread quickly. Reporters, capturing every detail, described a toddler who had unknowingly uncovered critical evidence with the assistance of a police dog. Social media buzzed with astonishment, and local news stations ran footage of the child's pointing and the dog's precise behavior. Viewers across the country were captivated by the tale of innocence and instinct converging to reveal hidden truths. The courtroom drama had transformed into a story of national fascination, a story that resonated far beyond the legal proceedings. Within the courtroom, the final moments of the trial approached. The defendant, pale and shaken, sat in silence, aware that his attempts to manipulate or conceal evidence had failed spectacularly. The jury, still absorbing the weight of the extraordinary revelation, prepared to deliberate. The judge provided instructions, emphasizing that the evidence revealed by the toddler and confirmed by the police dog was legally admissible and critical to their consideration. Every adult in the room felt the extraordinary weight of the events that had transpired. The jury deliberated for several hours, their discussions inevitably returning to the unusual circumstances. "We've never encountered anything like this," one juror said quietly. "The child and the dog, they pointed it out perfectly." Another replied, "It's extraordinary, but it's undeniable. The evidence was there, and they found it." The alignment between the toddler's observation and the dog's trained instincts provided clarity that no testimony or document could match. By the time the jury returned, their decision was informed not only by conventional evidence, but by the almost miraculous revelation that had captivated the courtroom. When the jury announced the verdict, the room held its collective breath. The defendant's eyes widened as the foreperson spoke clearly. "We, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts." A mixture of relief, awe, and satisfaction swept through the courtroom. The mother hugged her daughter tightly, whispering words of pride and gratitude. The German shepherd remained seated, calm and disciplined, a silent participant in the extraordinary story that had unfolded. The courtroom erupted in subdued applause and murmurs, recognizing that justice had been served in a manner no one could have predicted. In the weeks that followed, the story became legendary. The toddler, known for her quiet curiosity and keen observation, became a symbol of innocence and the unexpected ways truth can reveal itself. The police dog and its handler received recognition for their extraordinary role in confirming the evidence. The town marveled at the alignment of child and animal, celebrating the improbable duo who had changed the course of justice. Local and national news outlets ran stories highlighting the miraculous nature of the discovery, the courtroom's reaction, and the ultimate verdict. The defendant faced sentencing, his attempts to deny responsibility rendered irrelevant by the evidence discovered in such an extraordinary manner. Lawyers, reporters, jurors, and spectators recounted the story for years afterward, often describing it as one of the most remarkable courtroom moments they had ever witnessed. The combination of a toddler's intuition and a trained K-9 unit's instincts became a case study in unlikely collaboration, demonstrating that truth can manifest in ways far beyond expectation. For the mother, the child, and the dog handler, the experience left a profound impression. The toddler, though still unaware of her national fame, had participated in an event that would be remembered for generations. A story of innocence revealing truth, of instinct confirming observation, and of the extraordinary outcomes that can occur when ordinary expectations are exceeded. The police dog, ever vigilant, had fulfilled its duty with precision and discipline, its role etched into the annals of legal history alongside the child who had pointed the way. In the end, the courtroom drama was more than a legal proceeding. It was a story of human and animal collaboration, of innocence and expertise converging to reveal what adults could not see alone. The tale of the toddler pointing at the police dog, the dog confirming the hidden evidence, and the courtroom reacting in disbelief became a timeless narrative, reminding all who heard it that truth often reveals itself in the most unexpected ways. And so, as the courtroom emptied and reporters filed their stories, one thing remained clear. Justice had been served not by chance, but by the remarkable alignment of perception, intuition, and training. The toddler's pointing finger, the dog's trained instincts, and the adults who bore witness had together created a story that would be told and retold, a story of wonder, disbelief, and ultimate triumph. It was a reminder that sometimes the smallest voices can reveal the greatest truths, and that the most unexpected participants can change the course of history.